Alright, today we'll be working on this MacBook Pro. Kind of hard to see, but there is a crack in the screen up here. A cat actually chewed through the LCD panel. So watch those cats with these computers. They like to chew them sometimes. So first step is just to shut down the computer all the way. This MacBook Pro is an A2289. First we'll remove the screws holding down the bottom plate. The two at the top are the same size, and then these four along the bottom, we've got two tall ones for the outside two and two shorter ones for the inside two. I like to just organize them the way they were on the computer off to the side. Now what you do is you use a suction cup to lift. When you lift, you just work your black stick in, take it around the side until it pops on that side, take it around this side until it pops on that side, and then it'll pop up. There's two clips towards the middle that pop up when you lift it, and then once it's lifted, use the black stick to just wiggle off the bottom as so. So first step after removing the bottom case is to disconnect the battery. I like to flip it back around so I work at it from this angle. Take off that little plastic cover. Use your T5. Oh, first use a black stick to lift the little locking lever. Be really careful because these locking levers do come off and break pretty easily. And once that's disconnected, then you use your T5. Undo that battery screw, and then you're going to lift with your black stick the battery connector. Now the battery is fully disconnected. I like to flip it back around again and start working on getting all the screws out so we can pull the display. I'll start with a T5 and do the 4 screws along the bottom here. And then the T5 also is for the screw holding down the antenna cables. For that, you're going to lift up this cover. It's best to use a black stick to work some of that adhesive off so that the cover sticks back down when you put it back on. And then you can also use a black stick to carefully lift the antenna cables off the board. And that T5 removes the screw holding down the antenna cables. So that's up now. All right, now we switch to our T2, I believe. T3, sorry, or T3. And the T3 is used for most of the remaining screws. So we've got these two. Same thing on this side. Your screws holding down this connector cover here. Cable cover rather, and then the connector cover. Alright, disconnect that LVDS cable. And then since we're going to be swapping out the whole LCD panel, we're going to go ahead and undo these screws holding down the backlight and camera cable connections, because we'll have to disconnect those since we're replacing the LCD panel. If you were replacing the entire display and not just the panel, then you don't have to disconnect those. All right, and then hinge covers are another thing we can do with this T3. Figure out a better place for all my screws on my new desk setup. Got this overhead camera setup going, seeing how this works. All right, now we're going to use this guy. This is a 1PL, and that is for all these teeny tiny screws holding down the antenna. The antenna assembly. These screws are all the same, so you don't need to keep them separate at all. The ones holding down this assembly here, both sides are the same. All right, now that we've taken care of all that, we can lift this guy out. You want to make sure that these antennas go through the slot nicely, so you kind of twist it so it comes out easily. You don't want to break these off at all, so be nice and gentle. Now we need to remove the display from the MacBook Pro. To do that, I put it on the edge like so. I like to take out and assemble them so I can put them back in the same order, even though that's not necessary. I like to do it anyway. Do 2 on each side. And then I go back like so. But you can take them out in any order that you want. All right. Next step is to remove the display. So what you're going to do is make it so the hinges are fully open, and then just lift them straight up and it will come right out, nice and gentle like that. There you go. The display has been removed. We can move this guy out of the way. We don't need it for a while until we're testing. All right, so the next step is going to be to remove the bezel from the bottom, this little cover here, this hinge cover deal. This one's not cracked, so we'll try to keep it from getting cracked. I'm going to start up my hot air. I like to use these iMac opening tools. What I do is I trim down one side with the blade so it lies flat. And that allows me to kind of work it in underneath here. And then I have these for the starting points. These are the Apple ones. This is the iFixit one. The Apple ones work really good to start it, and the iFixit ones are a little more robust and work good for completing it. So we just give it a little bit of heat. The area that you're heating is really just along this top part here. You don't need to heat inside, it's just along the edge. That's where the adhesive is. And you don't need too much heat. Keep your heat moving, don't let it sit for too long in one spot. And then you come in and work your tool in between the, and I broke it. That'll happen sometimes. So I was trying to not break the bezel. I just replace them if I break them. And it cracked right there. But I'll still give you an example of how to do it once you have it started, then you work your way with this tool here. I like to heat up in front of it. The MacBook Airs are a lot more forgiving on the bezel. I'm not sure if it's a different material that they're using when they're making them or what, but they're easier to remove without cracking, and I've done a bunch of MacBook Airs in the last 24 hours. So so I was a little bit lazy. MacBook Pro ones are a lot more brittle, it seems. So again, just kind of heating up in front of it to make sure that the glue is going to come up pretty easily. And then you just work it along underneath. And normally, if I hadn't cracked it in the beginning, that's all there is to it, and it's all good. But in this case, I did get it cracked, so I'll be replacing it fully. Alright, I like to hit the air along the inside here to get rid of all the crumbs. There's almost inevitably some crumbs to deal with. Alright, now we're going to remove the screws that are holding down the cable cover assembly here, these guys. There's 6 of them holding them down. If you look, you can see which ones they are very easily. The other ones are all connected to the LCD panel, and these 6 are coming from the bottom bracket, so it's really obvious when you look at it closely, you can see it. Once all 6 of those are out, I like to use needle nose pliers, or needle nose tweezers rather, really sharp ones, and work this out gently. You don't want to pull or apply too much pressure to it because there's this rubber section in the middle and it will just tear right there or break in half or something like that. So there we go, that is out. Now I like to hit it with air again, get rid of those crumbs, and then we have the screws all along the bottom there that are holding the LCD down. Well, holding the bottom down a little bit. The adhesive is mainly holding the LCD down. The ones on the end, the ones on the far end, are a little smaller than the others, so you want to keep them, I like to just keep them in order, in a row. But you do want to pay attention so those end ones get back where they go. Alright, now that the screws are out, we're ready to start the heating process on this guy. I'll disconnect the camera and backlight cables now so that they are disconnected, because we are going to be pulling this guy basically straight up, more or less straight up. There's some adhesive that's holding it down. I'm just going to make sure that most of that adhesive stays behind so we have it for the other one. Great. And then there's also some yellow Kapton tape that's holding down around a screw where the screws go in. You want to lift up that Kapton tape just so it's loose. Just like that. Alright, now we're ready to heat. For that, I bring in this guy, set this down, turn him on, make sure it seals, perfect. So this creates a vacuum underneath it to hold it steady for me. So I'm going to wait about 5 minutes, 7 minutes for this to heat up, and then I'll continue with getting it off the edges. I'll also try to adjust my lights so we get some better light here. But I will be back shortly. Alright, here we go. I like to use this hook tool. And what I do is I work that in over here on the corner and through one of the screw holes. And then I'm able to lift the LCD from that edge. Just gently lift it. You're waiting for the heat to do some of the work. But you keep just steady pressure on it, and that will help the LCD lift free of that double-sided adhesive. If you pull too hard, you'll crack it, and that makes the job harder, so nice and gentle. And when you're applying the heat from the heat gun, just do it along the edge. You don't want to go this way at all. You want to kind of keep it to the side a little bit. Just get where that tape is, which is just a ½ inch or so along the side. Alright, it started to lift a little bit, just a tinge, enough for me to work in one of these business cards, double-sided cards with some gloss on them to help it slide. And on this you just want to go real slow. You want all your energy to go up and a little bit down, but don't pull up. If you pull up, then it will just crack. So you want to put your force mainly going this way, and then a little bit of force going down, but just a little. And keep it slow. If you go fast, you're more likely to crack it. Give the double-sided adhesive time to give. Alright, I'm coming up to the cat bite marks. Slow down a little bit more. Alright, I can feel it just kind of pulling that up, so I'm just going to leave that right there. And we'll work on the other side here in a second, but first I'm going to just lift this up so that edge kind of comes free a little. And then I'm also going to add some Kapton tape. Right where this screw, the part where the screw screws through, is going to hurt and scratch that area, so I like to put some tape down there to help protect it. I do 2 layers of Kapton tape, and that usually does the trick. You do 3 layers to be even safer. That'll make it so it doesn't puncture and go all the way and mar that plastic there. It's not a big deal if it does. It's a very small little scratch, but no need to scratch it if we can help it. So again, 2 or 3 layers, and just be careful when you're removing it, and that usually does the trick. Between the couple of layers and being careful is usually good. Alright. Same thing on this side. Get the heat going to it. Lift it. Okay, this one cracked really easy, so there must have been some cracking already starting down here in this corner. So the first thing I try is to see if it would pull up. If I work a card in, I'm going to push down like I said and up, but I'm not going to pull it towards the roof because then that will just crack it worse. Nope. Alright, that's not going to work. So what we need to do is start by getting this past that point like I was talking about. So what you want to do is kind of twist the black stick to relieve some of the pressure, and it pops right out. That usually does the trick. And then same thing on this side. This one's going to be a little harder because we've got a connection point still, but we need it to be up and above there. Now we're going to use the black stick. We're going to go underneath, but we're going to make sure we don't turn the black stick down and scratch the sheets in the back. So first step is to make sure all the sheets are down. They are. Second step is to work this guy in. And again, keeping pressure right here to make sure that the black stick stays up here and not down, pushing on the backlight sheets. Then I'm going to apply some pressure going this way and down, while I'm pressing with my palm down to lift the black stick. Again, all this is very gentle. You don't use a lot. And what that does is it pulls the LCD panel from the side. So it'll kind of pull the LCD panel off the adhesive here along this frame edge. It's working good. Now I'm going to carefully move the black stick in closer. Do the same thing again. That's just trying to put a little bit more pressure to try to pull that LCD panel off. I can feel it starting to give just a little. So now it's just a matter of patience. Alright, that's given enough that I can work the card in now. So I'm going to do that. Put the card in through to there. And then very carefully remove the black stick. So again, I don't mar those back sheets. Give a little bit more heat. And then same thing on this side. Slowly going this way and down just a little bit. Again, really slow. Slow is key. This is my first time working at this standing desk, so I sense I'm going a little faster than I usually do. So even slower than what I'm doing right now would be good. And I just realized my hat might be blocking all the shots. Sorry about that. Alright, now we are going to work on getting this top edge to come loose. To do that, what I'm going to do is reach in, being careful not to touch those back sheets. I'm going to pull this way and up, mostly pulling this way, and try to work this edge off where the cat lights are without having it splinter and crack everywhere, because that just makes life more difficult if it splinters, but I can hear it already splintering, so I'm afraid probably won't get much luck here, but I'll do my best. You don't want to hear crackling sounds. You can probably hear those crackling sounds. In a second, I'm going to be putting on a mask so that I can talk without getting spit on the backlight sheets. You don't want to mar those backlight sheets. They are very sensitive. stop and put on a mask. And I do not miss the days of wearing a mask all the time, that's for sure. Alright, this one's proving to be pretty difficult thanks to those cat bites. So the left side and at the top is harder than on the right side. But because these cat bites are over here, I'm kind of doing this backwards. I'm going to do the left side first and work it up all the way to the right. But normally I start on the right because the left side's quite a bit more difficult. The left side has more double-sided tape. All right. This one feels pretty good. I got this card in here. I'm gonna go along here really slow. All right. This should come up a lot easier now that that top section is loose. There we go, I feel it giving. All right. And then it's just, the key is to get this off with as little splintering as possible. Gosh, it's tough. It's so... This cat really did a number. Alright, we're going to add some tape. The tape helps with the splintering just a little. It doesn't help a ton, but enough that I think it's worth it in this case. Alright, not too terrible. Display is off. I'm going to hit some dust off this backlight sheet to get rid of the little bits of glass I can see that got on it just before they get sticky on there. Alright, that looks good. This to the side. And next is this guy. I'm going to go ahead and cover up the display so I can take this mask off. Alright. Now, what we want to do is score right here so we know where to put the new LCD panel, where to install this little section here. So you just score it right along the edge, and that way you can see exactly where to put the new one. And once that's scored, get your heat going again. Heat just that part of the LCD that is installed there. Don't get the white section hot. That will ripple and melt if you get that too hot. So just the black section. It doesn't have to be too hot. And I use my finger to push against the LCD to keep the tool off that double-sided reflected stuff there. Alright, now that that's off, we got a little bit more heat, just a little. Mainly I like to heat the tool. This is a Blick number 19. I think it's made for pottery or something like that. But it works great for this. Work that in between the LCD and this bracket deal. There we go. LCD is mostly done. We're going to take some other pieces off of it, so don't get rid of it completely yet, but we don't need much more of it. Next step is to remove this old adhesive. I found that this old A2289 display works pretty good, but you can use anything. I just like that. And you get yourself a razor blade. And you razor blade it off. It takes a couple passes to make sure you get the majority of that adhesive off. All right. Haven't got a trash can yet over here. I got to figure that out later. Okay, and then on the back, I always put on safety glasses for this because sometimes these blades break off as you're doing this, and you don't want it in your eye. But you want to do the same thing where you're just getting all the, or not all, but the majority of the adhesive off, scraped off, and that's just so that the next one sits flush. It doesn't have to be like shiny or anything, it just needs to be mostly flush. And again, you're applying a decent amount of pressure. I think this is a number 19 blade on this X-Acto knife. And you're applying enough pressure that sometimes the blades snap. So wearing safety glasses during the whole process is a good idea. But especially during that. Okay. Alrighty. Next step is to put some adhesive to replace the adhesive that you took off. Sorry if my head's getting in the way. I'll have to adjust the camera after I look at how this footage turns out. Just turn it over, get rid of the excess. Scissors are getting a little old, I'll need new scissors. Okay. This part is ready to go and be attached to a new LCD panel. So the next step is to test our LCD panel. I'm going to do that next. So what I like to do to test them, I bring out something to use as if it's a backlight. Set this down, attach it. All right, and then turn on the backlight, turn off these lights, plug it in. See how it looks. These guys are so fragile that during shipping they can get damaged, so you always want to test them before you get it locked in there all the way. So far this one looks good, but I'll let it boot to a login screen, hopefully. Sometimes these guys don't like to boot all the way with the battery disconnected. We'll see if this one's going to be like that, or if it's just going to work for me. Just thinking about it. All right, so it looks like we've got a password reset going on. That's pretty normal because the screen isn't visible enough, so you've had to shut it down using the power button, and it goes into this password reset mode. So in a second I'll be able to click restart, and then now it should boot regular. And I'm restarting it because hopefully there's a background image which helps me check for lines or noise or anything like that. This is looking great so far, but always good to be doubly sure before you install it all the way. There we go. All right. So I am just going to check it for any lines. Or noise, anything that is out of the ordinary. I like to be pretty thorough at this stage because it is lame to install it and then have there be something wrong with it. This one is perfect. All right, and then what I like to do is just kind of move around the cabling here gently, but make sure that there's nothing that is having problems or loose or causing noise is what I'm looking for, and there isn't. So now that we've done that, I am going to shut it down. Give it a second to shut down all the way. All right, and then disconnect the battery. I mean, disconnect power. Okay, disconnect the LVDS. Set this guy aside and move on to installing it. So what we're going to do now, this is not the housing that we are working with. All this does is allow me to get this bracket in properly. And to do that, I just make sure that the holes are centered. And I put a couple screws in. And make sure that those holes are staying centered. Great. Now I can put my brand new LCD panel in. And once that's nice and centered, put this little piece of tape down to keep it there. Yep, that looks great. So now I can lift this and remove the tape backing that I put down, that tape I just put down on that bracket. Centered again. Perfect. And then I like to push gently so that the tape gets adhered all the way across. Undo your screws that you put in. I put in these two here towards the middle. You can use the ones on the ends. You can use whatever you'd like. I usually do the ones like here and here as well, but yeah, this one's centered up really nicely. And then what you want to do is lift it up, get your fingernail in here so that you can lift up from the top and pull it out like that. We're done with this component and we're ready to remove the backing and line it up with that score that you did. Remember when we scored it so we know where to put the new one? You just want to line it up right with that. Takes all the guesswork out of it. You also want to make sure that none of these little tabs are stuck in between it, so keep an eye on that. Okay. Beautiful. All right, that went perfect. This guy is ready to install in the new, or this new guy is ready to install in the old display assembly, but our display assembly is not ready yet, so I'm gonna shift this to the side. You can get out the display and start working on it, so I gotta put my mask back on. Anywhere I see leftover glass, I gotta make sure that we get that out, because even just a teeny tiny bit of glass will cause all kinds of trouble during the final installation section. So I'm looking pretty close here. If you don't have good eyesight, get somebody who does, or wear some pretty strong glasses. All right. All right, that looks really good. I'm gonna hit it with some air. Now, we need to put new tape on. But I have to run and pick up some packages, so I'm gonna do that when I get back. So this is the stopping point for now. All right, so first step is to get rid of all the old adhesive. I like to start with my tweezers and just start working all this adhesive off. You may find that a different method works better for you. This is what I started doing when I first started it, and I just never changed. I do a second pass with a blade. It might make more sense to go straight to a blade. But once you get used to doing something a couple million times, it's sometimes easier to just keep doing what you're doing. It does work well for me. Okay. During this whole process, you want to be really careful not to touch or anything on this backlight sheet. I'm wearing a mask to make sure my spittle doesn't get all over it when I'm talking, because even just that amount will be an annoyance and could end up needing you to replace that, and those are annoying to replace and expensive, so better to not mess them up in the first place. not to slip, and more of that backlight sheet. And these areas where it gets really thin, you can usually pull it off, which is nice because that doesn't leave any of that adhesive behind, which means you don't have to go over that spot with a blade. So like here, once again, when it gets really thin, you can usually work it off carefully. Try to grab that glass as well so the glass doesn't fling back onto the display. Just really slowly lifting this, trying to keep it from cracking again. Got another piece here. It's already cracked on the edge. I don't want that little bit. There we go. I got the little bit that was eyeing our display. Alright, I'm going to go toss what I have in the garbage, and then we're going to tape up that section and get that off without spraying it everywhere. Alright, so I'm going to use that red tape again. This is my favorite tape for keeping stuff from getting everywhere, little glass shards, because it's pretty sticky. So it does a good job of hanging on to the little shards. So I'm going to cover up all the glass, start lifting it, and grab my handy dandy blade. I'm going to put my eye protection on again, because again, these blades have a habit of snapping off. Oh man, wearing a mask and glasses is almost impossible. I feel so bad for all the people during COVID who had to wear glasses and a mask. Alright. Again, just being super careful not to slip. Okay. Almost done. Right, that looks good. Now, with the blade, we're going to go around and do the whole thing again. Oops. Haven't done this side yet. Got ahead of myself there. Once we're done with this side, then I'll go over it with the blade. The idea here is just to remove every bit of adhesive so that when you put the new stuff down, it gets a really good connecting surface with no gunk in between from the old. Okay. So, now we're ready. Every little bit. I like to stop and clean the blade. Watch is telling me to stand up, even though I've been standing this whole time. My wrist position isn't right, I guess. All right. One side down, 2 to go. So here, I'm going to try to clean off as much as the adhesive as we can. You don't have to go too crazy. It's just a matter of getting the majority of it off and making sure it's nice and flat. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but that's the reason we're doing it. so what we're going to do now is put the mask back on. And then we'll start applying tape. So I like to start on one side. Go from the bottom all the way to the top, keeping it right against the edge. And then when you get to the top, you cut it with excess, like so. Then you use a black stick to make sure it's pushed all the way down. When you get to the top, work it into that edge, and I like to use the pointy side on the black stick. To really work it into the edge. And then I use the blade to cut the excess right on the edge. So the idea is to cut it right along the edge. So there's no excess, but it's flush. And then you do something similar on the bottom. You find where the depression is. With the black stick, you make the mark. And then with your blade, you trim into it. Pull it out. And we're done with that side. And then you do the exact same thing on the other side. Because I'm right-handed, I start at the top on this side. Okay. Same thing on the bottom. Okay, both sides are done. The top takes a little longer. So on the top, I cut the tape at an angle in order to have it sit in there nicely, because you want it to be flush against that top edge, like so. Take it flush against the top edge all the way over. Here I'll cut at an angle. Here we go. And right here I'm just kind of pulling the tape over so it is linked with the other tape. So there's no gap there anymore. All right, then I straighten out the edge on the tape. And I go from right to the side of the screw, flush against the old piece of tape that you have in there, that first piece you put down. Have it flush against that. You do not want them to overlap. No overlapping. All the way to the end. I cut with just a little bit of excess on that one, so I'm going to carefully trim excess. Again, no overlapping. That'll create a ridge. And then you just kind of pull it so it fills, like so. And on the other side, same thing. We'll go from, I'm going to straighten out my edge a little bit more. Right on the edge. I like to take it all the way to about there, right where the connector is for the eyesight. Make sure that these are both flush, which they are, feel good. All right, then I use the thin tape for that section in the middle. So I take a pretty decent sized piece of tape. And I have it be flush with the other and set it right into that metal that's showing along the bottom there. Cut this as close to perfect as I can. Spread that a bit so it touches. All right, that looks good. Now we're ready to install the LCD assembly. So what we need to do is get rid of any dust particles. I do very light, and then I go heavier after I get rid of everything I can see. And I keep that handy because I do one more hit before I put the new one in. All right, so I'm going to do a final spray. And I take a peek in the area where I'm going to be setting down the new one to make sure there's no debris. If there's any debris, I take it out. Okay, now take the backing off the replace. Actually, I'm going to hold off on taking the backing off the old display. I want to take off the backing off the tape first. Got ahead of myself. And then I hit it with air one more time. Sometimes there's dust that's sitting on this backing, and when you take it off, it flutters up and then lands on the display. Which is something to mention. You don't want to do this underneath a air conditioning vent or heater vent or whatever. You don't want to do it in a room where there's a fan on. You want it to be really still and as least amount of dust as possible. That'll help keep dust from getting underneath the LCD when you're installing it. All right, that's looking great. Now I'll remove the backing. Slide the bottom in, keeping the edges and the top up. Sometimes you have to lift the plastic things along the bottom to get that to slide in nicely. All right, then you visually line up the screw holes along the bottom. All right, and then you let it drop, and you just kind of guide it in very gently. Once it's sitting in place, you apply not a lot of pressure, but enough to make it so it sticks to that adhesive that you have down. All right. Now we just need to put our screws in along the bottom, those screws that we took out before. There can be some difficulty in getting underneath things that are in the way, but it's not too difficult. You just got to be careful of cabling to not touch it at all with your tools so you don't accidentally poke it and cause damage. Okay. There's one underneath this flap here. Small one on the end. Okay. And the small one on the end. And at this point you can remove those tape that you put in the way. And no marking at all, thanks to our 3 layers of Kapton tape. And being careful, but that Kapton tape really does the trick. All right. So our LCD panel is screwed down now. We want to test it again before we go any further. Make sure everything looks good. So we put on our camera and backlight cables. You don't want to force these, take your time, get them in correctly. I like to go ahead and install it just barely. With 2 of our screws. And then we'll boot it for testing. All right, and as you can see, actually I'll blur that. As you can see, the LCD panel looks great. So we are good to complete the repair. All right. So now that the display is testing good with that new LCD installed, it's all downhill from here. Bring it back out, and we're going to work on installing that bezel along the bottom. So first, we will remove any of the backing on these attachments here, blue tape or whatever color tape the backing is. Once that's all off, you can use the flat end of a black stick to kind of guide the material down. And then put in your cable protecting bracket thingy. All right, I like to push in the cables with a black stick, and then once I have them pushed in, I like to hold them there so they don't come out too much until I get a bracket in. And to put the bracket in, you just kind of push it with your black stick, not incredibly hard, but hard enough to get it to get past the screws that are holding it back, and then adjust it a little bit. And that side's good. And then same thing on this side. That way. There we go. All right. Perfect. Now we put our screws in. Usually you have to kind of hold it with the black stick so you can get the screws in nicely. And sometimes, even though you've adjusted it once and it looked good, you have to adjust it again. There we go. If you don't have patience when you start being an LCD repair technician, you had better get it over time, because it gets pretty tedious sometimes. That screw for some reason didn't want to stay on the screwdriver. Okay, done with that. Now we can remove our backing, and I like to install some additional tape. So basically it comes with some tape, the new bezel. But I like to install additional tape. I found that it helps the bezel not crack as easy. I'm thinking because it adds somewhat of like a little bit of a buffer. So I use this Tessa tape, and I go pretty low, so I have it be flush with the bottom. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm replacing it entirely, which means the new one has tape at the top. So I don't really need tape along the top, I just need tape along the bottom. So that's why I have it sit pretty low. If the old one is good, then I bring tape up a little bit further. But in this case, because I cracked it and have to replace it, this is what I like to do. Get this eyelash out of there. All right, that looks great. And then I add 2 more small pieces. I trim this so it fits on that edge. And again, I have it go pretty low because the new component has tape along the top. Okay, nice. And then on this side, have it flush all the way over. All right, that looks great. Now we can remove the backing install the new one. Let me go grab a new one that's centered here. Be right back. All right. Okay, so here's the brand new one. So what we're gonna do is, and you'll see what I mean about that tape along the top. So yeah, there's tape that runs all along the top. That's why I left that little bit of room there for that tape to adhere. Okay. Beautiful. The good news is that we have plenty of tape, so it's nice and sticky and it will adhere really well. Bad news is it makes it a little frustrating to get it sitting just right. Okay, this side looks pretty close. There we go. All right, now that I have that side good, focus on this side. All right. There we go. And that looks great, feels great. Perfect. Now we will get it back installed. There's still a couple more little things, but we're definitely past the toughest stages now. So I recommend putting in 2 screws again. And then I recommend closing it. Check to make sure there's nothing in here before you shut it so you don't break anything. And then loosen these 2 screws. And then you set it on a surface that's flat and you push down and you adjust a little bit so there's just a little hair of distance right here on both sides. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing a little bit. I'm going to move this and do it in the middle. All right. So you push it down and you feel with your fingers to make sure that the seam is flush. Like that. And once that's correct, then you grip it and turn it and set it down without letting it move at all. Tighten these 2 screws and you're good. I really like working on these foam pads. All right. Put in the rest of your screws. All right, and then what I like to do I like to put in the screws that hold down these cable covers, basically, because that gets them out of the way. Makes one less thing you have to worry about getting in the way for the next step. So I put those in first. And then I put the antenna assembly in. So to do that, you want to guide it through that little hole that they were in. Guide them all the way through. It's getting stuck on the adhesive there. All right, and then once they're through, take your time on this. There is no rush. Once it's through all the way, then I like to get the assembly installed nicely. So what you want to do is you want to look down in here and make sure that it kind of clicks into the groove that it fits into. And it did, so that's perfect. And then I put in, with my T5, the top screw for the antennas. So I don't put it in all the way, I just put it in kind of loose. And then I make sure this is all centered and nice, and then I put it in the rest of the way. And then I connect my antennas, because if you don't connect them now, you may forget. And then you'll boot up the computer and Wi-Fi won't work, and you'll be trying to figure out what you did wrong, right? And then once those antennas are connected, drop this little guy back down. Make sure that that adhesive adheres, and it did. And then I like to use the 1PL and get those teeny tiny little screws over with. I try to mention this on most of my videos, but if you want these to be threaded correctly, so you act like you're loosening the screw until you can feel and hear kind of like a click. So I'll show you if you listen. Hear that little click? That means it's threaded, and then you screw it in, because it just makes the thread be just right. And you'll be able to feel it kind of sink just a tinge as well as that audible sound. That can be really handy, especially for teeny tiny screws like these guys. Alright, that's looking good. I'm going to go ahead and put in our hinge covers now. You could do these, I usually do these closer to last, but they're a little bit precarious where I have them sitting, so I'm going to go ahead and do them now. Right. So one of the last steps that's kind of out of the ordinary is to transfer over components from the old LCD to the new. So to do that, I like to get the LCD in the same position as the new one is, so that's kind of the way it's facing. And then what you want to do is pull back on these. I'm trying to keep the adhesive down if I can. There we go. And on this side, come on. Sometimes the adhesive doesn't want to stay and you have to use your tweezers or something to try to keep it so it stays. There we go. See how there's a little bit of adhesive on both of these? And then you pull these off. That time all the adhesive stayed behind. All right. Okay, then you want to just install it on the new one. And basically all this does is keep it from having the cable be too tweaked. That's the scientific term, I believe. All right, there we go. So now it can rotate like so, and the cables will be a little more protected. All right, so now we can connect the camera again. Connect this guy again. And now we can use our T5 and screw down the 4 screws holding down this T-con board. And I do them all loose to start, and then I go back through and tighten them. So they're all loose. Make sure everything looks good, and tighten them down. Sometimes it's easier to get this LVDS cable connected before. I've done a lot of them, but if you have trouble, just connect it before you put the T-con board down. Okay, now we're going to do some of our cable covers and all that sort of stuff. So we'll start with the LVDS. Alright, and then when you do these, you just want to kind of place them down. So they look good. And then screw them down. So again, you kind of push them like that towards the top so they are sitting the way they're supposed to. Okay. This black piece is purely cosmetic, but it does look better with it on there. It's just a sticker. So I'll move that over. Then we just have the battery. So for the battery, you want to use your T5, get that battery connected. Use tweezers or a black stick, just don't touch the board with your tweezers. There's no rush, take your time. I do use a black stick for putting that locking lever down. Put your handy dandy cover over the battery again. Go brush this bottom off. All right, then for the bottom, you kind of push it down and up. Because there's little like clips all along here. And then once you like the way it's fitting, do your chiropractic adjustment. And put your bottom screws in. The really long ones go on the top two. The slightly long ones go on the bottom two on the outside, and then the shortest ones go in the middle on the bottom. that's for this A2289. Some of the other ones, the screws are different, so keep track of where you pulled the screws out and you'll be fine. All right. Now I use some Kapton tape to remove the film covering the display, the LCD panel rather, the new LCD panel. Get that out of the way, and then boot it up. It takes a minute, no need to push the power button. You just need to just plug it in and wait, and it will boot. And that looks pretty good. So we got a brand new LCD panel. We've got our battery is connected and working. And the computer is now ready to go.